The Yak-52 is an old Soviet, actually, but Russian training aircraft. Standard prop engine, just designed to for people coming into flying to learn how to fly from the basic level. So a very rudimentary, very not designed for military operations. It was never armed per se. I'm sure some have been, but yeah, it was never designed for this type of thing. Yeah, so if you actually go back in history, this is actually more like World War One than World War Two. So when the aeroplane was first invented, they used to be used for reconnaissance, not dissimilar to those drones. But over time, people started getting fed up with people looking at them from aeroplanes, so they started to attack them. And it was literally using hand weapons. So we are seeing literally a sort of rebirth of air power back from 1914. The reason it's happening is these drones are quite nuisance. There's plenty of them. They're cheap, but they're actually quite dumb. They fly in relatively predictable profiles. They don't really have any self-protection measures. They can't even see behind themselves. So they're quite vulnerable and they're quite fragile. So it's actually relatively easy to go and knock them out the sky with some pretty basic things, which is a lot better than using rather expensive, 21st century missiles that cost a lot more than a drone. So this is really just a way of finding another way of taking out a system, but in a really cost-effective way. There's basically two types of drone. There's a lot more than that, but basically two types. One is the type that's literally just taking pictures, taking video. It's just there for reconnaissance. And the aeroplane or the drone itself has got a small engine in, a little bit of fuel in, so it's relatively benign. The other type, of course, is the long-range one-way drone that's packed with explosives in the front of it. So if you shoot one of those down, they're likely to explode. So you do need to be quite wary of what might happen. And if you go back to the Second World War, so your analogy with Spitfires, it was the V1 Doodlebug. And there's quite a lot of footage of Spitfires and Hurricanes shooting those down with them exploding in front of them because they contain explosives. So another trick they used to use was to literally fly alongside and flip them to sort of put them off their course, because they weren't designed to maneuver. They just flew in a straight line. So if you could move them off the straight line, they would then hopefully go somewhere harmless. We actually did this in 2012, so it wasn't that well publicized, but during the Olympics, we did have a concern that we might see a rogue aircraft come into within the Olympic zone, and we were concerned about how we might deal with that. One way would be to shoot it down using a fighter jet, but again, that's quite dramatic, and obviously the debris is going to fall somewhere, so you have to be really quite careful. So we came up with a concept of putting snipers into helicopters, military helicopters. And they could either threaten, because they literally had LED signs that they could show the pilot of this so-called aircraft to come and land and get out of the way, because it might have been an innocent incursion. But they were also there effectively to shoot out the engine block, so they could disable the aircraft, so the aircraft would then have to land somewhere else. So we've done this over many years. This is just an evolution. I mean, and we haven't seen a lot of it. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to spot the drone. You've then got to get your aircraft up near the drone to then do whatever you're going to do to it. And so it's quite complicated. And look at the size of Ukraine. I think people forget how large Ukraine is. To be able to cover the entire country and detect every drone, you tend to shoot them down as they get closer to the target, because if you know what the targets are, you know where they're going to come to. So catching up with them on their way is a lot harder. And a Yak-52 doesn't fly very fast, so it's not going to catch up very quickly. World War One was literally the very first, the Sopwiths of this world, that the even more basic than a Yak-52. So we're talking an aeroplane that could probably fly maybe 100 miles an hour. You're literally in an open cockpit. And the first ever aerial combat, I think, was 1914, but I'd have to go back and check my notes. And it was literally airplanes carrying rifles, shooting at each other. Now, if anybody's tried to shoot at something moving, clay pigeon shooting, it's hard enough standing still. Imagine now trying to do that with both of you flying at 100 miles an hour, with both of you moving. It's not a simple endeavor. You have to get quite close. You have to be quite accurate. You have to know how far ahead you have to shoot, etc., etc. So this is quite quite difficult to do. We shouldn't underestimate the complexity of what people are trying to achieve here. I mean, I don't know how much training they've done. I can tell you the training that we did for the 2012 Olympics with the snipers in the back of Puma helicopters. Those were trained snipers who took weeks and weeks of training to get used to all the challenges of the vibration, moving with two dynamic targets. So you're moving, the target's moving. And it's not something you can just do by just going up and having a go. You really would have to get quite practiced at it. Now, you can get lucky. And these drones, I mean, they are really dumb. So that particular type of drone is just going to keep flying in a straight line, unless it knows you're there. But even then, it's probably not going to be able to do very much. So you could literally fly alongside it and literally tap it on the shoulder and blow it up there and then. So you can get extremely close to these things, and therefore it is a little bit easier. But the whole debate actually is about the cost effectiveness. If a drone is going to cost you, those aren't that cheap. Let's say they're going to cost you $10,000. Using $1 million missile is clearly not a very economic way of dealing with them. So finding a way that makes the drone cost greater than the cost of intercepting it is what's going on here. I mean, the fact that we've only seen one or two videos, it tells you that this is quite difficult. Yeah. And it isn't the answer. We are not heralding here a whole new way of fighting. I mean, this is a really innovative way of dealing with a particular problem in a particular area where they happen to have some capability. Because if that was happening, let's say a little bit closer to the front line, the poor old Yak-52 would be the target, not the drone. So this is only something you can really do in a very safe space where you've kind of predicted things are going to come through. And actually, if you look at the routes of these drones, they are relatively predictable. Everyone's worked out where all the defensive systems are, and the Russians are starting to route their cruise missiles and their drones through particular areas. So it does tend to get funneled into a vulnerable area. So if you can start putting layered defenses in there, which could include these Yak-52s, then it's just another tool in the box. The problem you've got, of course, is if you're also shooting the drones with missiles, the Yak-52 does not want to be there when that's happening. So it's quite a complex piece of planning to ensure that you stay out of each other's way, but you all sort of take it in turns as you begin to take these systems out as they come down. And it's not dissimilar. If you look at London during the Blitz in the Second World War, you had aeroplanes that would try and take them out over Kent. And then as they got closer to London, then you'd have artillery firing and balloons and. So it's all part of a very layered defense. So the Yak-52 has got a role to play. I think the fact we've only seen a couple of videos probably tells you a lot. And so it's not a new way of fighting. It's actually a very old way of fighting. But it's symptomatic of how do you solve the problem of a relatively cheap threat without having to spend an inordinate amount of money in defeating it. And the Yak-52, if you like, has brought that into stark relief. So it's not necessarily the Yak-52 that's the answer, but it does highlight the challenge, I think, that we all face. And they've been incredible. And whether it's adopting other Western equipment, learning how to use it very, very quickly, I mean, incredibly quickly, and lots of different systems, building them into a layered defense, and then never stop thinking of another way of doing it. So yeah, I think it is very symptomatic of how good Ukraine have been in being innovative, no doubt about it. If you look at the statistics, I mean, I follow it quite closely. So you look at the statistics every day, you see almost every single weapon fired at Kiev, as an example, as being shot out of the sky. We're talking 95% success rates of shooting down anything coming towards sort of population centers. And Russia knows that's going to happen. It sees it happening day in, day out. So it kind of sends another 50 or another 100, knowing what the outcome's going to be. But of course, their game is a different game. What they hope to do is wear out Ukraine stocks, wear out Western appetite to continue to send those stocks. So for Russia, this is a war of attrition. If they can basically tire out Ukraine and tire out the West from resupplying them, that is what the aim is here. Now, does it also reflect badly on Russia that their so-called incredible equipment, their wonderful drones, hypersonic missiles, etc., keeps getting shot out of the sky? that should start to send some ripples of concern back into Russia. Now, Russia's a regime that will suppress that type of thought, but there will be plenty of people in Russia looking at the statistics going, hang on a minute, these aren't working. You know, the Patriot system that we thought wasn't very good, or we thought we'd invented a system that could take it out, or that could go round it, it's not. So there should be some serious questions here for Russia, because what this is doing, and the Yak-52 is another example. You know, to be shot, to have your highly sophisticated 21st century drone shot down by a 1930s, you know, prop aeroplane designed for training by somebody with a machine gun out the back is embarrassing. You know, and so, yeah, I think it does send some messages that are perhaps beyond just the military effect. I think there is some messaging here that's not yet being fully understood by everybody. But for those of us that are sort of in the know, we're watching this with great interest, seeing things about how Russia fights and what it fights with that is not what they probably hoped it would be.